He was always a loyal friend and a guiding model. I appreciate that for a black man in this sort of business because he had his father. The world awoke to devastation. Malcolm Jamal Warner, a man whose smile brightened millions of childhoods, whose voice carried comfort and familiarity, was gone. Found lifeless in the waters of Costa Rica, news outlets labeled it a tragic mishap. But to those who knew him, nothing about this seemed like an accident. Fans flooded the internet with tributes, old videos, and memories that brought tears to strangers' eyes. Hollywood icons spoke his name with a heaviness that couldn't be concealed. But in the middle of this wave of grief, one silence was louder than every sob, every cry, every prayer. His wife, not a word, not a photograph, not even a trembling message on social media. She disappeared as if her life with him had been erased overnight. And then came the voice that would fracture the quiet. His mother, Pamela Warner, a grieving parent whose eyes had already endured too much loss. She stood before cameras, her voice quivering, her hands shaking, but her resolve indestructible. My son's death was not what they claim it was. Weeks later, a truth too heavy for a mother's soul to carry surfaced. A $200 million life insurance policy, hidden, secret, unknown even to his closest relatives. And in the days after Malcolm's passing, the entire fortune shifted quietly, without delay, into his wife's private account. Pamela's grief turned into doubt, her doubt into battle, and now her battle into a desperate pursuit for justice. Because this is no longer just about a son lost to the ocean. It's about whether the man the world cherished was taken from it. And if Pamela is right, the truth, when it arrives, will crush us all. The waves were serene that morning. The sun had just begun to climb over the sparkling waters of Costa Rica, painting the sky in gentle shades of gold and pink. No one knew that those waves would soon carry the weight of the world's sorrow. When the news emerged, it didn't feel real. Malcolm Jamal Warner, the man whose presence had been a comfort to millions, whose laughter had once echoed in our living rooms, was gone. No lingering illness, no warning, no chance to say farewell. Just gone. Reporters called it a tragedy. A heartbreaking drowning, they said, their voices smooth and detached, as though the word heartbreaking could ever capture the way a mother's heart splinters when she gets that phone call. Tributes poured in within moments. Fans shared old snapshots, videos, memories of meeting him, of the way he made them feel like they mattered. Actors and creators who had worked alongside him spoke in choked voices, their eyes wet, their sentences breaking mid-thought. The internet became a shrine to his memory, every post drenched in grief. But amid the ocean of mourning, there was an absence, a hollow space that screamed louder than any cry. His wife. Where was she? Why wasn't she there holding his mother's hand? Why wasn't she speaking to his supporters, thanking them, or even just asking for privacy? She wasn't in the photographs from the memorial. She wasn't posting online. She wasn't anywhere. It was as if she had vanished from existence the moment Malcolm's heart stopped beating. Then came the fracture in the silence. It was Pamela Warner, Malcolm's mother. A woman whose devotion for her son was visible in every glance, every touch, every proud word she had ever spoken about him. Now standing before a wall of blinding cameras, she looked smaller somehow. The kind of small that comes when grief drains. The light from your soul. Her voice quivered, but her words cut through the noise like steel. My son's death was not an accident. The atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a heartbreaking loss. It was about suspicion, about secrets, about the possibility that something far darker had happened in those waters. Pamela spoke of Malcolm's boyhood, how he had been swimming almost before he could walk, how the water had been his safe haven. She couldn't believe that the sea could take him like that. She said she had doubts, questions. No one seemed willing to answer. Weeks passed. The news cycle began to dim. The public started to move on, but Pamela wouldn't. She dug, she pressed, she demanded. And then one day, the truth she had been searching for crashed into her life, like a freight train. It came from Malcolm's own attorney, a man who had known him for decades. He told her about the life insurance policy. $200 million concealed from public knowledge, hidden from her. A sum so enormous it didn't even sound real, like something out of a film. Pamela sat frozen as he revealed. Malcolm's wife was the sole inheritor. And here's the part that made Pamela's blood run cold. The payout had been processed within days of his passing. No holdups, no legal obstacles, just an immediate transfer, straight into his wife's private account. Pamela felt the grief in her chest solidify into something else, something weightier. She confronted her daughter-in-law. She wanted answers, reasons, anything that could make sense of what she had just uncovered. But what she got was silence, followed by a storm. The confrontation erupted into a clash so fierce that Pamela ordered her out of the family home. The woman who had once called her mom walked away without turning back. Pamela's tears dried that day. She no longer saw herself as a mourning mother. She was now an investigator, a warrior, a voice for her son. She hired attorneys. She combed through bank ledgers, contracts, emails, anything she could get her hands on. And the more she searched, the less sense it made. Witness statements didn't match. The official timeline had holes. Phone records showed calls that had been made and erased. The insurance records were dated in ways that didn't line up. This was no longer just about a mother's doubt. This was beginning to feel like something far, far more menacing. Pamela went to the FBI. She handed them everything she had uncovered, her voice firm, but her hands trembling. She didn't care how high this reached or who was implicated. She wanted the truth. Word spread. The press swarmed. Hashtags erupted across social media. Justice, formal, $1 million widow. People took sides. Some saw Pamela as a fighter for justice, refusing to be silenced. Others painted her as a shattered woman, letting grief twist her into seeing shapes where none existed. But shadows have a way of hiding in open sight. The FBI's involvement shifted everything. What had been a family loss was now a possible criminal investigation, and as the agents started digging, more whispers began to emerge. Whispers about disputes, about financial strain, about a marriage that might not have been as flawless as it appeared on camera. Still, nothing was certain. There was no clear smoking gun, no undeniable evidence, just a mountain of suspicions and a silence from the one person who might hold all the answers. And then came the footage. Someone, no, one knows who, leaked security video from a small dock in Costa Rica. It was blurry. The kind of footage where faces fade and details are swallowed by darkness. But you could see Malcolm walking toward a boat, and you could see someone else behind him. A figure moving swiftly, almost too swiftly. The video stopped abruptly. Too abruptly. The internet exploded. People slowed it down, zoomed in, examined every pixel. Some swore they recognized the figure's stride. Others said it was impossible to know. Pamela didn't need validation. She had already made up her mind. For her, it wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making sure the world understood the truth, about ensuring that Malcolm's death wasn't reduced to a cold headline and a forgotten news report. She would fight until her final breath. And somewhere, far from the flashing lights and public uproar, a woman with $200 million in her possession kept her silence. The question isn't just what happened in those last moments. The question is, how far would someone go for a fortune that massive? And if Pamela is correct, how close is the truth to finally being exposed? The footage was only 8 seconds long. 8 seconds that split the internet in half. It showed Malcolm walking alone toward the edge of the dock, a quiet stride in the fading evening light, and then that shadow, a figure drifting behind him, just far enough to be out of touch, just close enough to follow every stride. Pamela replayed the clip over and over. Every viewing pulled the air from her lungs. She swore she recognized the way that figure walked, the angle of the head, the faint hesitation in the left leg. She didn't speak the name aloud, but in her heart, she already understood. The FBI didn't verify anything. They never do, not in the middle of an ongoing case. But the questions they began asking told Pamela she wasn't imagining things. They requested bank statements from both U.S. and Costa Rican institutions. They combed through months of call logs. They pulled travel records and cross-referenced them with hotel check-ins. The paper trail was long, and somewhere in it they believed was the truth. And then came the witness. A local fisherman hardened by the sea claimed he saw something the night Malcolm died. At first, he stayed silent. He didn't want problems. But when the story began making worldwide headlines, his guilt grew heavier. He told investigators he saw Malcolm on the dock and he saw someone else there too, quarreling with him. He couldn't make out the words, only the sharp tones, the sudden movements. Then the sound of something weighty hitting the water. He said, "Malcolm didn't leap. He went in wrong." The fisherman's statement struck Pamela like a sledgehammer. She thought she was ready for the truth, but the image of her son gasping for breath alone in the dark water was almost too much to endure. Meanwhile, the silence from Malcolm's wife stayed unbroken. No interviews, no appearances, not even a lawyer speaking on her behalf. The only sign of her was the quiet hum of financial activity in the background. A newly purchased estate in another country, luxury cars bought under shell companies, and offshore accounts receiving transfers. In discreet, calculated intervals, Pamela's legal team leaked what they could without endangering the case. Public opinion shifted sharply. The woman once viewed as the grieving widow was now the million-dollar widow, a title that dripped with accusation. Social media turned merciless. Posts about her were filled with venom, theories, and unfiltered fury. But behind the viral headlines, Pamela sat in her kitchen late at night, staring at her son's photographs. She replayed old voicemails just to hear his laughter again, and every time she did, her resolve deepened. This wasn't just about suspicion anymore. This was about proving the world mistaken if she had to, or proving them correct if it meant giving her son the justice he deserved. The FBI's investigation uncovered another piece of the puzzle, the life insurance policy itself. It hadn't been active for decades. In fact, it was signed and finalized just 18 months before Malcolm's death. And here's the part that set off alarms. The monthly premiums weren't paid from Malcolm's account. They came from his wife's. On paper, it could be framed as an act of devotion, a wife wanting to secure her husband's future. But in the shadow of everything else, it felt like something else entirely. The timeline was starting to take form. The marriage had reportedly been tense. Friends spoke off the record of quarrels over money, over time apart, over trust. And then came the policy, the trips to Costa Rica, the sudden impulse to spend more time away. Pamela's mind replayed every instant she could remember. Every holiday where something felt strained, every phone call where Malcolm's voice sounded distracted. She had thought it was just the grind of fame, the fatigue of working too much. Now she wondered if it had been something far darker brewing behind the scenes. Then the call came. An FBI agent, his tone cautious, told Pamela they had found something important. He didn't say what, only that it was enough to shift the case from inquiry to full criminal investigation. The words made Pamela's knees buckle. Part of her wanted the truth right there and then. Another part wanted to flee from it, to cling to the version of events where her son's death was just a cruel accident. But there was no escaping now. Leaks to the press hinted at what might be coming. Travel records showing Malcolm's wife leaving the country less than 48 hours after his death. Security footage placing her at a bank in another city the very next day. And whispers of a private detective who had been following Malcolm in the weeks before he died. The media frenzy erupted again. Every network ran the story, each spinning it their own way. Some painted Pamela as the grieving warrior mother taking on a dangerous conspiracy. Others questioned whether grief had clouded her judgment. But the more the facts emerged, the harder it became to ignore the cracks in the official story. And still, the most important question hung in the air unanswered. What happened on that dock? In those final moments, Pamela began receiving messages from strangers claiming to have information. Some were hoaxes. Some were opportunists chasing attention. But a few seemed believable. One came with a photograph. Grainy, but clear enough to show Malcolm and his wife in what appeared to be a heated exchange just hours before his death. Pamela stared at that image until her eyes blurred. She didn't know if it was the smoking gun, but she knew this. The Malcolm in that photo didn't look like a man about to enjoy a peaceful evening by the water. He looked like a man standing on the brink of something he couldn't escape. The FBI's case continued to build quietly, methodically. Pamela wasn't allowed to know every detail, but she could sense the weight shifting. She could sense that they were getting closer. And somewhere far away from the flashing lights and questions, a woman with $200 million in her possession lived in silence. Her every step tracked, her every move documented. Pamela knew the truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deep someone tried to bury it. She just didn't know if the moment it broke the surface would bring her peace or shatter her all over again. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with closure. Sometimes it comes with a revelation so crushing that even winning feels like losing. And Pamela was about to learn which one it would be. The day the truth finally broke felt heavier than thunderclouds. Pamela was sitting in her living room clutching the same sweater Malcolm used to wear when he visited. The TV was on but muted. She couldn't bear the endless speculation anymore. Then her phone rang. It wasn't the FBI, it wasn't a journalist. It was Malcolm's old friend, his voice trembling so badly she could barely make out the words. They're about to announce it. Turn on the news. Pamela's heart began pounding so hard she could feel it in her chest. She turned the volume up, just as the anchor's expression shifted into that solemn, careful tone reserved for national tragedies. The FBI has officially ruled Malcolm Jamal Warner's death a homicide and has named his wife as the prime suspect. It was as if the air was pulled out of the room. Pamela's hands went icy. The words prime suspect echoed in her ears again and again. She had believed it. She had fought for it. But hearing it confirmed wasn't triumph. It was a wound tearing open deeper than before. The details spilled out in a slow, deliberate drip, each one cutting sharper than the last. Surveillance. Footage from the dock's security camera showed Malcolm's wife arriving just minutes before he walked toward the water. Audio enhanced from a nearby microphone caught fragments of their conversation, the jagged edges of an argument about money and freedom. Then came the damning moment, a push, not a stumble, not an accident, a clear, intentional shove. Malcolm's body hit the water, and instead of diving in after him, she stood there watching. The footage was grainy, the sound warped, but the shape of the truth was unmistakable. The FBI said she made no attempt to call for help, no attempt to pull him out. In fact, investigators revealed she walked away, leaving the dock entirely within 2 minutes of his fall. Pamela covered her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. The image of her son's final moments, struggling, calling out alone, was now etched into her soul. The anchor's voice carried on, now with the financial evidence. Records show that within 48 hours of the incident, Malcolm's wife accessed offshore accounts, purchasing property under an alias, and transferring funds from a $200 million life insurance payout. The policy, investigators say, was arranged and paid for solely by her in the year and a half before his death. Pamela remembered the day she confronted her. The frost in her eyes, the way she packed her things without a single tear. Now it all made sense. She hadn't been mourning. She had been securing her getaway. The world reacted instantly. Hashtags trended globally. The Justice Formal erupted again, bigger than before. Videos of Malcolm laughing in interviews and embracing fans played alongside clips of the news conference. People wept on live streams, strangers posting messages to Pamela urging her to keep fighting and bring her down. But amid the chaos, Pamela felt no joy, no comfort. The truth, now public, didn't bring her son back. It didn't erase the lonely terror of his final breath. Justice was still miles away, trapped in courtrooms and procedures. The FBI issued a warrant for her arrest. She was reportedly last seen boarding a private jet days earlier. Authorities believe she had fled to a country without an extradition treaty. The manhunt began, but with $200 million at her disposal, she could vanish for years. Pamela faced the cameras again, her voice trembling but fierce. My son did not die in vain. I will spend every last day I have on this earth hunting the person who took him from us. Money can run out, hiding places can be uncovered, but a mother's fight never ends. The public watched as this grieving mother evolved into a force of sheer will. She hired her own investigators to work alongside the FBI. She contacted global media pushing Malcolm's story into every corner of the world. And yet, in the quiet moments when the cameras were gone and the house was silent, Pamela would hold Malcolm's sweater and whisper the same thing into the fabric over and over. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." In one final twist, an anonymous source leaked an email exchange between Malcolm and a close friend written just 2 weeks before his death. In it, Malcolm wrote, "Something feels wrong. I can't explain it yet, but if anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll talk to my mom." Those words spread like wildfire. They were printed on posters at vigils, posted across social media, and engraved into the hearts of his fans. It was no longer just Pamela's fight. It had become a movement. Months later, a tip from an informant in Eastern Europe emerged. A woman matching her description had been spotted in a luxury villa, guarded and heavily secluded. The FBI wouldn't confirm or deny the lead, but Pamela knew in her bones it was her. The story, once dismissed as the ramblings of a grief-stricken mother, was now indisputable truth. The image of the smiling boy who grew into the man adored by millions now carried an unshakable shadow. A shadow cast by betrayal, greed, and the cold hands that pushed him into the water that night. The dock in Costa Rica became a memorial. Fans traveled from across the globe to leave flowers, candles, and handwritten letters. Some swore they could feel his presence in the air, a lingering warmth in the ocean breeze. Others cried openly, unable to comprehend how someone so full of life could be taken so suddenly, so brutally. Pamela visits once a year. She stands at the very spot he fell, staring into the endless blue, imagining the boy who once laughed in her kitchen, who once promised to buy her a house when he made it big. She tells him about the progress in the case, about the strangers who fight for him, about the love that hasn't dimmed even a little. And then she walks away because she knows she can't stand there forever, not while the woman who took him is still breathing open air. The story of Malcolm Jamal Warner is no longer just a tragedy, it's a war cry. It's a reminder that behind the headlines, there are real hearts breaking, real families shattered, and real mothers who refuse to let the darkness win. Somewhere out there, a woman is hiding. And somewhere else, a mother is hunting her, armed, not with weapons, but with truth. And when the day comes that they meet face to face, the world will watch. If you've made it this far, you know this isn't just another headline. This isn't just another celebrity heartbreak that fades into the background. This is a mother's fight, a son's stolen future, a $200 million secret that someone thought would stay buried at the bottom of the ocean. But it hasn't. And it won't. Not while we're here. Every single view, every share, every comment you make pushes the story further into the light and further out of the shadows where the guilty are hiding. The woman who took Malcolm's life is still out there. She's still breathing open air. And every day she's free is another day justice is denied. Pamela is still fighting. She's chasing leads, talking to the FBI, pushing this case into every corner of the globe. But she can't do it alone. She needs an army. She needs you. Share Malcolm's name. Share his smile. Share the truth that the headlines tried to bury. Post his story. Flood social media. Make sure that when the person responsible sees the internet, all they see is his face staring back at them, a face they can never escape. We owe Malcolm more than just memories. We owe him justice. We owe him the ending he deserved. One where love wins over greed, where truth wins over lies. Don't let this fade. Don't scroll past and forget. Join the movement. Stand with Pamela. Stand with every mother who's had to bury a child and fight a system that moves too slow. Because the day justice comes, and it will come, you'll be able to say, I was part of the fight. Malcolm's story isn't over. Let's finish it together.